and thank you for joining us again at Voice of Rohingya Radio, a registered nonprofit media broadcast coming to you from the state of Oregon in the United States of America. We act as the media wing of the Arakan Rohingya Union, providing exclusive interviews, reports from inside the border, and the latest news from reputable sources from around the world. We'd like to ask you to take a moment and go to www.vorradio.org for up-to-date news and information concerning this program and how you can get involved. Voice of Rohingya Radio is the only news source of its kind in the English-speaking world. You can learn more about the Rohingya cause by supporting us today, and we'll continue bringing you the latest news in a convenient format and keeping you informed and involved. You can listen to our program each week, Sundays at 7 p.m. Pacific Time, and if you're interested in sponsoring our program, simply log on to our website or send us an email to support@vorradio.org. It is March 22nd, 2015. For Voice of Rohingya Radio, I'm your host, Zach Taylor. In our top story tonight, the United Nations Special Rapporteur on Human Rights from Myanmar warned Wednesday against categorizing Rohingya Muslims as illegal aliens and called for addressing the continuing discrimination against the country's minorities. During my last visit in January of 2015, I witnessed how dire the situation has remained in Rakhine State, Ms. Yang Hee Lee said during the presentation of her first report to the Human Rights Council in Geneva. She went on to call the conditions in Muslim IDP camps abysmal and detailed heartbreaking testimonies from Rohingya people that told her that they only had two options: stay and die or leave by boat. Ms. Lee cautioned against any provision in the Rakhine Action Plan that would classify Rohingyas as illegal aliens and subject them to possible prolonged internment in camps or removal from the territory. The expiry at the end of this month of the temporary white cards held by many Rohingyas as their identity documentation further increases their vulnerability, she said. The rapporteur called on the country's authorities to address ongoing challenges to the democratic reform process before they undermine the success achieved so far. I was very disturbed by the reports on March 10th that excessive and disproportionate force had been used against students and other civilians and that 127 people were subsequently arrested, she said. Ms. Lee welcomed the release of some detainees, but also called for the immediate release of all others. Further, Ms. Lee drew attention to the pressure on human rights defenders, including prosecutions under outdated defamation and national security laws, which have a chilling effect on civil society activities. She said, quote, "I am concerned journalists are still being interrogated and arrested, and that 10 journalists were imprisoned in 2014. This needs to stop if Myanmar wants to create a meaningful democratic space," Ms. Lee said in a press statement. While noting that economic development had benefited some in the country, the expert urged the government to ensure that others are not left out and called for a human rights-based approach to development programs. Ms. Lee also expressed concern over the alarming escalation of fighting in the Kokang region, where over 100 civilians are reported to have died and tens of thousands have been displaced. Even during a state of emergency, the government has an obligation to strictly uphold fundamental human rights, she reiterated. More still needs to be done to address the underlying issues at the heart of the conflicts, including discrimination against ethnic minorities. 4 bills currently before Parliament risk increasing tension, she emphasized. Director General of the Arakan Rohingya Union, Dr. Waqar Uddin, along with members of the European Rohingya Council and the ARU's Global Rohingya Center, also attended the conference. Over 40 countries and several NGOs made statements on the Rohingya issue, where almost all of them shared the view of the UN Special Rapporteur. Amongst them, the government of the United States, several European countries, Saudi Arabia, OIC, and Human Rights Watch expressed the strongest support for the cause of Rohingya. The Myanmar representative refuted most of the testimony by the Special Rapporteur and often used transition to democracy as a pretext for all the violations by the government of Myanmar. The Myanmar representative bluntly rejected the ethnic identity of Rohingya and disregarded the indigeneity of the Rohingya people in Arakan. In the side event, Dr. Waqar Uddin, DG of the ARU, and GRC representative Dr. Muhammad Taher Siraj spoke on ethnic cleansing of Rohingya in Myanmar. Their presentations covered the situation on the ground in Arakan, the government's hostile policy towards Rohingya that is triggering the violence by Buddhist Rakhine, verification process as a tool for second-class citizenship or internment in camps, and several other issues. Their speech vastly reflects the reports of the Special Rapporteur, The Arab League meeting at the session also discussed the Rohingya issue, and the ARU-DG stressed the need for the Arab League and all of the OIC member states to increase their efforts and speak out through all multilateral and bilateral relations with Myanmar. The resolution on Rohingya human rights at the 28th HRC is due to be released shortly. In a related story, Yang Hee Lee said on Wednesday she expects Myanmar to guarantee her security, despite failing to censure a radical Buddhist monk who called her a whore and incited his followers against her during her last visit to the country. The UN Special Rapporteur has angered the country's government by criticizing its restrictions on political freedom and by demanding citizenship rights for the Rohingya in Rakhine State. That has also made her a hated figure for Buddhist monks led by Ashin Warathu, who once called himself the Burmese bin Laden and mosques' enemy bases. He denounced Lee as a, quote, whore and a bitch at a public rally in January. After Lee submitted her recent report to the UN Human Rights Council, Warathu posted a threatening repost on his Facebook page that read, "Dear Patriots, let us find ways and means to teach this beastly woman a lesson," according to a translation by the Human Rights Office. The UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Zaid Ra'ad al-Hussein, is, quote, disgusted with the latest comments. His spokesperson, Rupert Colville, said, "He sees it as a clear and personal incitement to violence, and he wants to stress that it's absolutely the responsibility of the government of Myanmar to deal with threats of violence and incitement and to ensure the safety of the Special Rapporteur when she visits." Lee told reporters that there's always a great possibility that her personal safety could be jeopardized. She said, "I have confidence in the Myanmar government that they will see that my security and the security of my staff is their utmost priority. But it doesn't mean that any individual couldn't do something crazy. However, I am disappointed that the government has not disassociated itself from these remarks, and the government has blamed me for leaving the country with this distrust, discord, and incitement." Under Myanmar law, all slogans and logos for any rally must be cleared with authorities beforehand, Lee said, so the government could have prevented Warathu's 10-minute-long inflammatory speech. Warathu was jailed for 25 years in 2003 for distributing anti-Muslim pamphlets that incited communal riots in his hometown, where a Buddhist mob killed at least 10 Muslims. But he was freed in 2011 during an amnesty for political prisoners. A Reuters investigation in 2013 found that organized attacks on Muslims in late 2012 were led by Rakhine nationalists incited by Buddhist monks and sometimes abetted by local security forces. You were listening to Voice of Rohingya Radio. Thanks again for listening to Voice of Rohingya Radio, your source for Rohingya news. We'd like to remind you to visit vorradio.org, where you can get involved and show your support. Saudi Arabia today expressed regret for the continuing widespread systematic violence in Myanmar, particularly against the Rohingya Muslim minority. A member of the Saudi Human Rights Commission and member of Saudi Arabia's delegation to the UN Human Rights Council said in a speech before the UN HRC in Geneva that after having carefully reviewed the UN report on the human rights situation in Myanmar, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia believes that this tension can lead to an escalation of violence, killings, and horror, and that the Muslim minority would be the biggest losers due to the revocation of their nationality documents. The kingdom's representative to the UN Human Rights Commission said that institutionalized discrimination against the Rohingya Muslim minority could lead to mistrust and undermine efforts to enhance dialogue and understanding amongst peoples. The kingdom demanded that the government of Myanmar do more to promote greater understanding and amicability among the country's different communities through activating the Memorandum of Understanding signed with the Jeddah-based Organization of Islamic Cooperation, as well as plans to provide infrastructure development assistance to Myanmar and specifically to the Rohingya region. The kingdom has already donated $50 million to this effect. In other news, the National League for Democracy has expelled more than 20,000 temporary identification cardholders from the party's membership, purging non-citizens from its ranks in compliance with a legislative mandate. According to an article in the Irrawaddy, the expulsion of the so-called white card holders, described as such because their temporary identifying documents are white, was prompted by a change to legislation dictating the operational bounds of Burma's political parties and follows a ruling by President Thein Sein stripping the groups of suffrage last month. The amendments to the law restrict party membership to holders of full citizenship in Burma, precluding associate citizens, naturalized citizens, and white card holders. Parliament voted in September to amend the political party's registration law, which cover who is eligible to found and join a party, respectively. The changes stripped both provisions of previous wording that allowed any full citizen, associate citizen, and naturalized citizen or white card holders to participate in party politics, restricting eligibility to full citizens only. The disenfranchisement of white card holders has included revoking their right to vote in a constitutional referendum slated for May and a general election due late this year because of a presidential ruling last month that will see the cards expire on March 31st. In addition to the loss of suffrage, current white card holders will likely see their ability to travel around the country curbed due to lack of identity documents. The government has said white card holders will have the opportunity to obtain a level of citizenship by undergoing the national verification process, an ill-articulated procedure that involves applicants proving that their ancestry was born in the country. Many of the country's white card holders are Rohingya Muslims, a persecuted minority largely based in western Arakan state. Burma's immigration minister, Kien Yi, told the Irrawaddy last month that there was an estimated 700,000 to 800,000 white card holders countrywide. In other news, we received a report yesterday that fears are mounting that 6 people arrested in Zidi Farang, Raute Dong, have been killed in custody, according to our local correspondent. Villagers raised the alarm after police claimed on Monday that the men arrested earlier had escaped, something of an anomaly amidst the stringent security measures adopted in this part of the country. 4 of the men from nearby Rajar Bil were arrested for encouraging fellow villagers to boycott the census, as it required Rohingyas to identify themselves as Bengalis. The 2 other men whose identities could not be confirmed are Tablai-e-Jamaat members from Mongda. They were arrested for not having proper permission to travel from Mongda to Raute Dong. They were brutally tortured in custody and one of them had his beard burned. Arrests were made by a border guard police deputy commander identified as U Tin Aung Kya. His soldiers killed a 14-year-old girl recently during a census in Rajar Bil. One of his torture methods is to burn the beards of his prisoners, especially those refusing to register as Bengalis. Hundreds of Rohingyas were forced to start a risky life with an uncertain future in Yangpingi, village of Raute Dong Township, Arakan State, our correspondent reported. 76 families from the village were made homeless on the 25th of October in 2012 during the second round of violence in Arakan State. Their houses were burnt to ashes, their properties were looted and destroyed, and many of them were killed or jailed, said a local victim. Among them, 56 out of the 76 families were placed in an IDP camp in the same village, and 20 other families were not recognized by authorities and were left without help of even aid organizations. But those 20 families took shelter nearby in an IDP camp with self-made small huts. On Wednesday, the 18th of March this year, Umang Mang Township Administration Officer approached the IDP camp and ordered all the people to attend an urgent meeting. During the meeting, he told the residents to destroy the camp and go back to their own land where their old houses were located in the village. When he was asked how they were to rebuild without money, the officer replied that each family will be provided with approximately $1,000 US as compensation, receiving $800 now and paying the remaining $200 when the homes were completed. The reparation money had been handed over to 56 families, a local IDP confirmed over the phone. When questioned about the remaining 20 families, the officer said he could not comment about those who were not listed. Those vulnerable 20 families remain out of favor and are again homeless and hopeless. There were only 24 Rohingya villages in Rothe Dong Township amidst 24 Rakhine village tracts. 3 of the Rohingya villages were uprooted during the violence in 2012, and their residents were placed in IDP camps located in the southernmost part of Maung Da. Now the besieged Rohingya community in Rothe Dong is under pressure from the Rakhine extremists and government forces, and people aren't sure what to think about being given money to build homes without any permits or concern for security. I'd like to take a moment to address any of our listeners in the Southern California area. The Burmese American Muslims Association is hosting a fundraising dinner this coming Saturday, the 28th. Bama President Aji Asab Had U Sa Hleng and supporters will be serving a halal dinner featuring Burmese food while raising awareness for minority rights in Myanmar. The event starts at 6 p.m. at the Culver Teen Center in Culver City, California. Tickets are $20 for adults and $10 for children. Thanks again for listening to Voice of Rohingya Radio, a weekly news program bringing you up-to-date information about the Rohingya people in Myanmar. You can catch our broadcast every Sunday night at 7 p.m. Pacific Time here in the United States by logging on to vorradio.org, or you can join our page on Facebook to find more information on the program. For Voice of Rohingya Radio, this is Zach Taylor, signing out.